Greetings. Welcome to our next session together. Today we're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 20, that chapter in its entirety, which it's not very long. So at this time, go ahead, pause the video, and take a few moments to read through that, either out loud or to yourselves in your group. Okay. Now, what's happening here in this passage is another instance. This is the second time that Abraham conceals the fact that Sarah is his wife. Now, for a bit of context here, this is immediately following the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, which Abraham witnessed that. And if we recall, he was negotiating with God to spare that city. And that negotiation just kind of came to an end at the end of chapter 18. And then in 19, we see that God goes ahead and destroys the city. He does, of course, rescue Lot and initially his wife and two daughters. But Lot's wife doesn't make it all the way out. So this would have been, to put Abraham in context here, he's probably deeply discouraged, because he was trying to argue on behalf of these people, and God, who is taking an active role in partnering with him, basically tells him no, that the city is going to be destroyed, and it was. And so this would have been, at this time, very discouraging for Abraham. And the chapter here in chapter 20 begins with Abraham journeying there to the south, and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur, and stayed in Gerar. Now he is, and we don't know exactly why he's traveling, but we know that he is. And this doesn't seem to be something that God is commanding him to do, that he just does it. And then as he is approaching the king of Gerar here, a man by the name of Abimelech, he speaks of Sarah, his wife, and he says that she is his sister. Okay, now we'll talk about this briefly because we had addressed this before. To say that Sarah is Abraham's sister is in fact not entirely truthful. He's concealing the fact that they're married, and he's doing so to protect himself. And that is at the expense of at Sarah, his wife, her expense. And so he was in fear, as in chapter 12, that someone was going to kill him and take Sarah as their wife. But if she is unmarried, then she can be taken as a wife, without any consequences falling on Abraham, which is, again, very selfish, and really awful for Sarah. Now, as far as calling Sarah his sister, or calling Sarah his sister, that's actually not entirely inaccurate, and we talked about this before. She was of the same Bet Av as him, the same house of the father. As it turns out, she would have been like a niece to him, and he does take her and marry her, out of compassion and to protect her. But they are in fact married, and that is something that is being concealed here with Abimelech. Now, when this happens, Abimelech takes Sarah into his harem. He does not consummate that relationship, and God, and we don't know really how long, but God keeps that from happening, as we're going to see in this story. God is actively protecting not just Abraham, but also Sarah. And specifically this because it's going to be from Sarah that Isaac will be born, and there needs to be no no question as to who the father is of Isaac, of this what will be this miraculous son that comes to Sarah. But it says here in verse 3 that God came to Abimelech in a dream, and said to him, "Indeed, you are a dead man." And then he goes on to explain that this woman that you have taken is actually married. Now this is fascinating, because this is a pagan king who does not know Yahweh, and Yahweh appears to him in this dream. And I can't imagine how terrifying this would be for God to appear to you in a dream, and the first thing that he says to you is, "You're a dead man." He then explains that what he has done is taken someone's wife, and that there's going to be consequences befalling him and his people for this. And Abimelech, it says here in verse 4, now look at this. He says, "Lord, will you slay a righteous nation also? Did he not say to me, 'She is my sister'? And she said, even herself, that he is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands I have done this." So Abimelech's appeal is, I had no idea. And he didn't do this maliciously. Now, again, in the grand scheme of things, you could say, well, it's not very moral for him to take many wives, right? Yeah. Understand, though, that in this culture, we do not have the commandments of this yet. And in this culture, this was very well accepted, very common. And so what happens here is he does take her as a wife, but he does not consummate that relationship. And God is, you could say he's kind of pleading his case before God. He's saying, I did this in the innocence of the integrity and the innocence of his hands and his conscience. So he, in this instance, by taking her as a wife, he didn't actually do anything wrong, because he didn't know that she was in fact married. And then in verse 7 it says, "Now therefore restore the man's wife, for he is a prophet." Now I want you to notice this, because this is the first time that this word is used in Scripture, prophet. And we know that later this becomes a very significant word and a very significant title that God uses for his people that he selects to be his mouthpiece and to be his teachers and instructors for his people. It's kind of fascinating, because God is calling Abraham his prophet, which he is. But in this instance, he's not acting, if you look at Abraham's behavior, he's not really acting like a prophet. And this would have been surprising, I would think, that, oh, this man who you took his wife only because you didn't know, because he lied to you, he is a prophet of mine. And so, again, Abimelech is maintaining his innocence. And, and in verse 8, so Abimelech rose early in the morning, called all his servants, and told all these things in their hearing. And the men were very much afraid. And Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, "What have you done to us? How have I offended you, that you have brought on me and my kingdom a great sin? You have done deeds to me that ought not be done." So you see, in this story, more and more what comes to light is Abraham is not really the hero figure in this story, is he? Abimelech is much more of a heroic figure than Abraham is. Then Abimelech said to Abraham, what did you have in view that you have done this thing?" And Abraham said, "Because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will kill me on account of my wife. But indeed, she is truly my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife." Okay, so here is where Abraham is explaining a bit of the complexity of the relationship that he has with Sarah. And this is actually true, what he's saying, but again, it sounds like he's kind of trying to justify himself. He's saying, well, yeah, she is my sister technically. But again, he concealed the fact intentionally that they were married. And then in verse 13, it came to pass when God caused me to wander from my father's house, and he said to her, this is your kindness that you should do for me in every place. Wherever we go, say of me, he is my brother. Then Abimelech took sheep and ox, male and female servants, and gave them to Abraham, and restored Sarah his wife to them. And Abimelech said, see, my land is before you. Dwell where it pleases you. And then then to Sarah he said, behold, I have given your brother. Now that's interesting that he would say that instead of your husband, but he kind of goes along with that. 1,000 pieces of silver. Indeed, this vindicates you before all who are with you, before everybody. Thus she was rebuked. So Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, his wife, and his female servants. Then they bore children, for the Lord had closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. Okay, so this, again, we don't know exactly how long she was in his harem. But from that moment, whenever she was brought in and sort of made his wife, Abimelech's wife, God supernaturally stopped any sexual activity from happening somehow, and it caused that there's going to be no children born. There's going to be no relations that take place throughout his whole kingdom, it seems. And so what God was doing was he was protecting Sarah in all of this. Now, again, what method did God use? There's been some speculation as to how he did this. When he comes first to Abimelech in the dream and he says, "You are a dead man," some scholars have suggested that he was speaking potentially to that he had no ability to have children, and that God was sort of stating this and sort of claiming that he was the one responsible for this. We don't really know, but we know that supernaturally there wasn't going to be anything happening where any children could be conceived. And God did that supernaturally. And then in verse 17, it says that Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, his wife, and his female servants. Then they bore children. So what's happening here is Abraham is now mediating between Abimelech and his household and God, and he is praying that they would then be able to conceive children. Because again, in this time, in this culture, being able to conceive children is crucially important. And so the irony here is this. Abraham is God's chosen prophet. He is praying on behalf of Abimelech and his household, his family, so that they can conceive children. And then God immediately grants that, and they are able to then conceive children. The irony, and this is a very strange and sad reality currently for Abraham, is that he still, with his wife Sarah, are unable to have children. And it has been this way for a long time. And yet, he now is put in this position where he is praying for someone else, that someone else might be able to have children, and then it happens immediately. God grants that prayer, it seems like right away. And so this had to be, I would think that there'd be a lot of mixed emotions from Abraham here, because he's thinking God supernaturally stopped them from being able to have children, protected Sarah, and then through Abraham's prayer of intercession, he supernaturally grants them again the ability to conceive children, and then they do. And yet, in the midst of this, Abraham is like, but you haven't given me a son by Sarah yet. And you've promised it. You've promised it over and over and over again. And you're doing this for these other people that I've prayed for. But how many times do you think that he prayed for it himself, or prayed for he and Sarah to have a child? And the answer thus far has been no. And so this would have been, I would say, a very eye-opening experience for Abraham. It's also, I think, teaching us some things. One of the things that I think we can learn from this is God is trying to cultivate in Abraham someone who will go for him, and who will teach people his ways, that will proclaim the goodness of God, and who will pray for people, and those prayers are answered. He is molding him into this, and he finds himself in this situation that's very unique. And clearly Abraham is messing up. I mean, he is definitely not the hero in this story. It really seems like Abimelech is the hero. And what we can glean from all of this is really the only real hero in all of these accounts is God himself. That God is faithful. He protects Sarah, and then he grants again the ability for Abimelech and his household to conceive children again, after he had put an end to that. And so Abraham is, if I was in Abraham's position, I would feel very like, I would probably almost feel betrayed. Like, God, you're supposed to be my God. You're supposed to be partnering with me. You're supposed to be on my team. And yet I can pray for somebody else, and you grant them the ability to conceive just like this. But you haven't done that for me. And so this would have been absolutely a time of learning and reflecting, I think, for Abraham to really ask the question of what is he doing? What is he trying to teach me? And how can I attribute what's happening to anything other than God not allowing it to happen, even though he had promised it over and over again? So there's definitely tension in this story, and I think in your groups, as you discuss this, put yourself in Sarah's place, how she would have felt through all this. Put yourself in Abimelech's place, right? Being deceived, being kind of set up to fail, it seems. And then put yourself in Abraham's place. How was he feeling with all of this happening? God supernaturally intervenes, and through him and through his answered prayer, that he grants this king the ability to have children again. There is a lot of blessing, like material blessing, that is conveyed from Abimelech to Abraham at this time. But again, Abraham he's kind of left probably feeling like, okay, God, you clearly can do these things. You can allow people to conceive children miraculously. You can stop it from happening, and you can cause it to happen. But you haven't done it for me. And so there'd have been a lot of questions of why, I think, that Abraham would have to wrestle with. And he's got some apologizing to do, specifically to his wife, Sarah, I would think, and to Abimelech. So, as usual, go ahead. I didn't go through everything here. There's still more to explore in this. But in your groups, wrestle with some of these things. And indeed, it is helpful to look at it from the perspective of each person, each individual in the story. So as usual, I'll be praying for you, and I wish you well. Thank you.